Joining me now is Republican State Senator Bob Mensch from Pennsylvania, who has sponsored a bill to create statewide electric vehicle infrastructure. The bill also includes central charging facilities to serve medium, heavy-duty, and governmental fleets. Senator Mensch, it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us. So I don't know the inside domestic political scene inside Pennsylvania. I'm more of a DC guy, but I'm sure it's interesting. But I do find it bold from my general kind of understanding of where North is and South and East and West, that you're out there pushing an EV infrastructure, climate responsive infrastructure. So what's going on in Pennsylvania and with this bill?
We began to work with a very broad coalition of vendors, and not just the electric distribution companies, but also software companies, car manufacturers, so many companies that would be providing services to the EV market. And it is not, I have to correct you, it's not across the state yet. We're talking about 15 counties. But
right.
In those 15 counties, we find about 80% of all the EV vehicles in Pennsylvania. And what is lacking still is the charging station infrastructure. So the intent here is to, in a cooperative way with the industry and with government, with our PUC or the Public Utility Commission, to be able to begin the build out for more charging stations to facilitate additional growth. I was listening to the interview you had just a moment ago with the Congresswoman Clark, and she talked about the inevitability of electric vehicles. The manufacturers are driving us there now, no pun intended, but they're beginning to build and commit to building many more EV electric vehicles in the near future. And so I think it's prudent if we begin to think about what will that future design have to look like and how do we prepare for it.
So, I'm really interested in this and the kind of nuts and bolts of it. My understanding is, I think you represent part of Montgomery County, which I know. Am I right on that?
That's correct.
Yeah, and so how would it work? So, one area I was very surprised, and I told this to Yvette Clark, how quickly the passenger car charging station is filled out. And I don't know if that's because there's been good policy and partnerships between local and state and other incentives out there. But what are some of the missing I guess, I would say market failures that government or various partnerships can fix? Explain to us what your bill can do by way of, creating smart infrastructure that's needed and that the market itself won't provide.
The intent is to create a completely open architecture for electric charging stations so that we won't have proprietary systems popping up. Many people use Apple phones. They're quite familiar with how Apple is different from other vendor phones. That has worked well in the phone market, but it's limited people's mobility of their devices. Well, when you're buying a car, an electric car, you don't want to have to worry about where will I find a charging station for my model car. This needs to be a completely open architecture so that when you have an electric vehicle, you can pull into any and all of the charging stations and be able to charge your vehicle. There's also the within the design itself, being able to provide appropriate mechanisms for consumers to be able to pay for the use of the electric and so forth. So it's trying to promote and create a very open, agnostic, non-vendor specific design or architecture for charging.
Senator, another area I've paid a lot of attention to in my work is, how 5G is being rolled out, in cities around the country, or before that, long time ago, how distributed power and solar panels on people's homes. And what I found is that you could go to a place like California and find wide discrepancies between what you could do in one county versus another. And it often was, permitting reality, non-financial barriers, if you would, to various ways. And, I once told some folks in California, why don't you rank where you can kind of move the fastest, the quickest with the least, problems, and then, do this. And I think the same thing is true with putting all the sensors in cities for, a kind of broad 5G network. Is the permitting part of this part of the equation that we have to deal with?
There was a very loud noise outside my office, so I think you're still talking about 5G. And
5G, but also about permitting. So as 5G, I'm using 5G as a metaphor, that one of 5G's problems is that cities really differ with permitting. And so they want to go in with infrastructure. We're going to have this, great new world of big data and fast cars. But unless you've got a city or a place that's very willing to transform that permitting culture. And I'm just wondering if EV infrastructure is facing some of the challenges in the country, but also in Pennsylvania, of having a permit-friendly environment.
Pennsylvania has probably more government than any other state. It goes back to the original Constitution establishing, or incorporation rather, establishing the state. So we have a myriad of townships and municipalities that each interpret their own zoning laws. So it is an obstacle in many ways, particularly to 5G build out, as you mentioned, but it could also be an obstacle to electric charging stations build out. And so that's why we would want to bring in the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission to help to have an even hand over that regulation and be able to work with the electric distribution companies and provide a consistent interface and one permitting process as opposed to many and disparate permitting process.
Bob, I also know that you worked for AT&T for 28 years, and I know a lot of folks at AT&T. So you get infrastructure, you understand the dimensions of it. There are a lot of different, elements to it. It's not just a phone line, it's not just a cable line, it's not watching, HBO Max. There are a lot of other pieces to it. So when it comes to power and grid, and there's so many dimensions as we sort of look at what the next generation is, you have the Clean Transportation Infrastructure Act, but what are the other pieces of that sandbox that you also need to have in place by way of power grids and advances so that it all fits together?
We had to ensure, and again, I think having the PUC involved in the process would help to grade this, but we need to ensure that the network itself, the electric network itself, has adequate capacity. One of the concerns expressed to my own caucus last week was that as we continue to build out for electric vehicles, that we don't overconsume the electric services that are available. I don't believe that is the case. I'm told by the folks in the industry itself that we have adequate capacity to accommodate additional cars. But that will be part of this process. Designed into the bill itself is I'm going to call it a department. It's not the right terminology, but a group that will assess the electric needs across the state so that we can continue the appropriate build out, have adequate services. Pennsylvania, as a member of PJM, or the Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland Power Consortium, is still a net exporter into the PJM network, and we don't want to compromise that. That is one of the benefits of Pennsylvania. So we would continue to manage this in a way that we have excess capacity that would accommodate the build out of the electric vehicles.
Senator, just finally, I know Pennsylvania politics can be feisty at moments, to say the least. But this sounds like the kind of bill that there might be a unique moment of a bipartisan oasis. Is that right, or is this a fight that will still require some work to bring over Democrats to be supportive?
No, actually, we have a lot of bipartisan support for the bill. The factions that we need to bring together are the disparate energy producers in the state, and having the traditionalists working with the evolving electric need. We have oil and gas in great abundance in Pennsylvania, and we are very cautious to protect that resource and that economic resource for the state. But at the same time, we need to bring them together with the electric companies in a way that this evolves in a reasonable solution for everybody.
Well, State Senator Bob Mensch, this is going to be a topic. We're going to be doing a three-part series, on the broad subject of EVs and EV infrastructure. So I hope you'll come back and we can get a, status report on how things are. But thanks so much for sharing with us your legislation and what you intend to do with it. Thank you.
Steve, thanks for the opportunity. Always glad to come back. Thank you.